the record button, and that has started. So we will get started here. And the first thing I want to do, I want to thank, there are a lot of people are involved in helping with this morning, and then too with the in-office meetings. Jeannie Flynn has been a tremendous help working on a buyer's handbook that you're going to have. This is the little buyer's handbook. These are going to be in all of your offices, so you can use them as a guide as you're talking with buyers. So there'll be a nice ample supply of those. It's a beautiful brochure, and Jeannie worked very hard on getting that ready for us. Also, Karina Decker has been working with Delta Media so that as we move forward and the any compensation information is removed from the MLS, we'll be able to put it on our website, and we'll be talking more about that. And Karina is going to be coming to those in-office meetings also to actually show you how you will do that. So we're going to try to walk you through everything. And I think the main thing to remember is that we're all in this together. We're going to go through it together, and we're all going to learn a lot. There are still unanswered questions and some things, some questions that may be asked that we won't be able to answer, but they will be forthcoming from the attorneys at the National Association of Realtors and Florida Realtors, and local attorneys also. Also, I'm going to encourage all of you, and I think a lot of people already have, please watch the webinars that several of the law firms are doing. Berlin Patton is getting an ongoing series. Excellent, absolutely excellent webinars and in-person classes on this. I think the more you can attend and learn, the easier and it's going to be for you. I don't think there's a single thing to be worried about or afraid about. We're going to, as I say, we're all in this together, and we're going to walk through it together. As you have individual questions or concerns, give me a call anytime. I'll be glad to work with you and answer those questions as best we know them right now. So you have, hopefully you were able to get all of the forms printed out in front of you, because that'll help you as we go through today. And we're going to go through the forms this morning. That's probably our main, one of our main things. And Cindy will tell you in a little bit too. She's getting ready to go on a listing appointment Thursday and wanting to know, golly, what should I do in advance of this? So we've talked about that a little bit, and I'm going to let her tell you what she's going to do when she goes on her listing appointment on Thursday to list. So bit by bit, we're going to get into this and work on this. Again, you have your in-office meeting dates next week, where we'll be coming to all of the office, and we will either have a breakfast or a lunch at each of those meetings. So be sure to let your manager or your administrator know, so we can get a count for the meals, the food that's going to be provided. And those are going to be very informal. We're going to go through the forms again, answer any questions, do some role play, and spend time to help put you at ease as we work through this. And the more you look at the webinars, you talk about it, it begins to make more sense, and it's nothing to worry about. We'll all get through it together. In the packages sent to you, the updated antitrust compliance policy for Wagner Realty was sent to you. Please read it carefully, sign it, and turn it into your branch managers. This is extremely important, and actually that is what brought all of this about, were antitrust issues. So review that, sign it, keep a copy for yourself, of course, and turn that into your offices so that we'll have that on file for all of you. The main thing is read it and understand it. We can't talk about commissions with any of our competitors or other companies. Within our offices, within our company, we can, but you cannot talk about compensation with any other firms. Then we have a National Association of Realtors settlement guideline sheet. And what I did with this, I just went through the giant 99-page of guidelines to try to break it down a little bit for you, for the things that really affect us. A lot of it was a lot of legalese and had to do with the settlement that didn't really affect us. But the main thing is that the settlement did cover our MLSs, it covered our firms, it covered all of you. So that is important to note. Now, the actual date for the implementation of this moving forward officially is August 17th, coming up in a couple of months. However, as MLSs begin to work toward removing any and all mention or offers of compensation commission from the MLS systems, our Stellar MLS is removing it 2 weeks from now. So in 2 weeks from now, that will be gone, removed. And so we might as well let's start working on the new guidelines and easing into it a little bit and practicing a little bit. It is probably a good idea for us to do that. So effective on August the 6th, offers of compensation are no longer going to appear in the MLS. There can be no mention of compensation, commission compensation, any place in the MLS. There will be a box that'll talk about seller concessions, yes or no. However, that is not to be any mention of commission. Seller concessions are going to be considered, they're going to do a buy down for points on a mortgage. They're going to give a credit for certain closing costs, that kind of thing. Those are the concessions that the yes or no box will be about. So if the only concession the seller is offering is, yes, they want to keep paying commission to an agent working with buyers, that cannot go there. It will be on our website. We can put it on the Wagner website and be in compliance with the NAR settlement guidelines. And that is what Karina's been working on with DeltaNet. And we're going to show you how to do that and how to go about that as we come to the in-office meetings. And we'll talk more too about the listing agreements. Unfortunately, we don't have the revised listing agreements yet. They don't come out until the 23rd of July. So we're going to talk about, well, what do we do in the meantime? And that's what Cindy's going to talk about a little bit too, getting ready to go on a listing appointment. And indeed, in advance of that August 6th date, any sellers, any listings that you have that are not under contract, if they're already under contract, you do not need to worry about this. But if they're just active, not under contract, you'll need to make an appointment to go and meet with your sellers. And in a minute, you'll see the form that you're going to show them. It's one you haven't seen before. You're going to show them and you're going to talk about what's going on, what the changes are, so that they can make a decision on how they want to move forward. And you don't have to change anything unless they go, you know, I think perhaps I don't want to pay commission to a buyer's broker moving forward, although I rather imagine they're all going to want to continue to do that. So we'll talk more about that. Effective on the 17th of August, that's that official date, all agents working with buyers, before you show property, before you tour property, before you do a video tour with the buyer, you will need to enter into a written agreement specifying the compensation due to you. This can be done either with the showing agreement, which we'll look at in a minute, but if you use the showing agreement, you'll also need to use the compensation disclosure form, the two forms, and I'll explain why. Or with the new exclusive buyers brokers agreement, which incorporates all of the necessary language in that one. It's the brand new one. Make sure you pull whenever you're doing listing forms or you're doing your buyer broker forms, because you think of a listing with a seller, you've got a listing with the buyer broker form. So you've got like two listings in a sense. Make sure you always pull the transaction broker format so it has the correct language of our duties in it. The important thing as we get into that buyer's broker's agreement, the important thing with that written agreement, it has to specify the commission, the pay you're going to collect with a successful transaction. But one of the main components of this, you cannot collect more than what it says in that agreement. So if a seller is offering, you get with the listing agent and the seller is offering 3% to a buyer's broker, and your agreement says 3%, that's, you're not going to collect 6, you're only going to collect 3. So that will clear up any confusion there that might arise out of that. Or conversely, if a seller is maybe offering 2 and your buyer's broker's agreement or your showing agreement says 3, then the seller would credit 2 and the buyer would do 1. You can't combine them. So the amount that will be in that showing agreement or the exclusive buyer's broker's agreement, that's the maximum that you can collect. There will be questions coming up about what about bonuses? What about working with builders? That is a gray area. That is one of the questions that we can't totally answer. The only thing that I can say is there is a modification that perhaps could be done to the buyer's broker's agreement or the showing agreement that might revise it if something like that should occur. But we're going to get more guidance on that moving forward. Everybody has been somewhat concerned, well, what about open houses? What do I do in an open house? Do I have to stand at the door with these agreements? No, you do not. Open houses are exempt. So and I'd encourage lots of open houses. You do not have to have people sign agreements. They can come in, they can tour the home, look at the home. But if you have a buyer that really begins to engage with you and maybe indicates that they would like to consider making an offer on this particular property, then you are going to need to enter into a written agreement with them. And we'll talk more about that coming up with open house scenarios later too. The types of compensation available to you when you're working with a buyer would be from a seller, if a seller is offering it, a combination of the two, or the buyer can pay it. And one of the things that I think will be important, which you already do moving forward, is when you are working with the buyer and they need to get a mortgage, make sure you engage with their lender so that their lender knows that you're working with them and what your compensation amount is for them. I think that is going to be very helpful moving forward. Also, some of the title companies will be asking for copies of your agreements. Others will not. But I think as a rule of thumb, and the attorneys at Berlin Patent are indicating that this is a very, very good idea. Make sure when the title company gets a copy of the sales contract, they also get a copy of your buyer's broker's agreement and any other agreements that you have so that they have everything that they need to prepare the settlement statements. One of the other main things is that compensation is negotiable and it will always continue to be negotiable. And that's on listings with sellers and on listings, if you call them that, with buyers. Compensation is negotiable. And we have to use a rule of reason too with people that you're working with, whether they're sellers or buyers. And so again, the buyer's broker's agreement, one of the main things about that is you can't collect more than what that agreement with the buyer says. Then there are some additional guidelines on that sheet for you. If you have a fully executed buyer's broker's agreement, you're going to want to turn it into the office just like you do a listing. That's a listing. You've got a listing with the buyer. You'll want to turn that in so a file can be set up. And then hopefully there'll be a sale to follow as you work along with them. And then it'll get moved into the contract drawer. So remember that it's a listing with the buyer. Any listings that are now under contract, as I mentioned earlier, do not have to be amended. Listings that are not under contract as of the date that compensation will be removed from Stellar, you need to have a meeting with the seller to let them know of the changes and to let them know that that compensation they're offering is no longer going to appear on MLS. But there is going to be a vehicle for that on our Wagner website moving forward. The new listing agreement will be coming out, and it's going to have the language that's needed in it. We'll take a close look at it, and we'll be talking more about that, of course, on the 23rd when that comes out. And any offers of compensation that are agreed upon, you can also spell those out carefully in any sales contract that you're drafting and getting ready. So the main thing is transparency. Everybody understands, obviously, everything in the contract, including the compensation that is being offered. So it is that transparency that is key. The next form in the packet that you received was the compensation disclosure form. And that's the new one that we will make sure that there's a new package set up in Form Simplicity for working with buyers. And this particular form, you're going to use this with sellers, with your existing listings, that when you go to meet with that seller in advance of the August 6th date, when compensation is moved out of MLS, you're going to use this compensation disclosure form to meet with the sellers that you have listed to explain, here's what's happening, here's what's going on. The offers are going away from the Stellar MLS, but in the contract, the listing contract that we have, you had agreed that you would like to compensate buyers brokers. They have a choice. They probably, I would think, are going to want to continue to, as perhaps most sellers will. Time will tell about that, of course. So if for some reason they wanted to no longer offer compensation, then you would need to do a modification to your listing agreement. I really think that most sellers are going to want to, though. So they're going to sign this form. You're going to sign it the same way that you're authorized to sign a listing. Make sure when you meet with your sellers, take 2 of these with you so you can give them a copy of what they've signed right then, and you have a copy for your file and make a copy to turn into the office. So that way. And Cindy, when you go on your listing appointment on Thursday, that's let Cindy explain to you what she's going to do.
Yeah, basically, one of the first things that I'll do is explain, obviously, the changes that are taking place, and have the seller sign the compensation disclosure, determine, if they want to offer compensation to the co-broke agent or broker. If they do, hey, great. If they don't, that's fine as well. I'll use the current standard listing agreement in indicating on what their choice is. If they determine that they do want to offer compensation to the selling broker, then we would also fill out the listing broker to selling broker compensation agreement. So any agent that would be showing the property that might want to request that or have confirmation of that amount or percentage, I would be able to provide that.
All right. Thanks, Cindy. And that's exactly what you'll all want to do. And the next form we'll see is that compensation agreement, the seller's broker to the buyer's broker. And we use that one because in the listing agreement, the seller is giving us the authority to offer that compensation to a buyer's broker. So that will be the form. You will not upload these forms to the MLS as an attachment, but you'll have them available so that when you get a call from an agent asking what the compensation is, because we'll be able to show it on our website, compensation, yes, and they'll call and indicate how much is it, what is it. And you'll memorialize that with this document with their buyer's name and the property address on it. Now, once we get into negotiation in an offer, we know sometimes, that compensation changes because it is negotiable. And so if that should happen, we can amend this seller's brokers to buyer's broker compensation agreement with a modification. And we do have that modification form.
Why
This
can
is
I
one of
not
the
hear
four
on
new.
here, Stuart?
This is one of the 4 new forms that came out from Florida Realtors. So these are new to you, but there is that modification agreement. Then maybe you're showing property with the buyer that you've listed. You have your buyer's broker's agreement, and you're going, and there's a for sale by owner. And the buyer, gee, we're in this neighborhood. Let's see about this, this for sale by owner. In that case, you could always check with the seller to see if the seller would want to pay compensation. And if they did, you could use this seller to buyer's broker's form. Or if you have a listing in MLS where the seller is not offering compensation, and, we get a call from an agent and they go, could you please check with that seller? I think that house is exactly the one that would be perfect for my buyer. Then in that case, the seller might agree to it, and that would be the form that they would use, the seller to the buyer's broker. They're going to, compensate on this particular transaction. Most of the time you'll be using, I think, in these cases, a seller's broker to the buyer's broker. That's going to be the most common one. But they do have this other one and a modification agreement that goes along with it as well, if you do have need of using that. Now we get to the agreements with buyers, and we said there are a couple. There's an old form that's in Form Simplicity. Is it going to be revised? I'm not sure. And the reason I talk about that revision is important because it's a showing agreement. It's not quite as comprehensive as the exclusive buyer's broker's agreement, but it's pretty simple, basically. And it may be, I know one of the sessions that we looked at, they talked about, that's kind of like, well, we're dating. We're going to look at 3 houses here and see if you want to work with me or I want to work with you. And so we'll start with this showing agreement. Not quite as comprehensive, but it will work. It is a written agreement that does spell out your compensation. And you'll see that I put compensation on that particular one. In the showing agreed on number 5, I put 3%. That will be Wagner's professional fee when you're working with a buyer. Now, again, rule of reason here. You've worked with this buyer many, many times before or whatever. Commissions are negotiable. So I just want to reinforce that one as well. So this showing agreement in itself, until it gets revised, if it does get revised, is not quite enough. Because with the new rules moving forward, we have to do this complete transparency. So we'll go back to that form, that compensation form that we talked about when we're going to go talk to sellers. We're going to do that with a buyer at the same time so they understand full transparency here. So we'll need to use the showing agreement and the compensation disclosure form if we choose the showing agreement. So we may want to do that showing agreement, and we're going to look at a few properties. Perhaps the sale will result from one, and that is great. We'll turn that in to the office with the sales contract and all of our forms like we normally do, so that a folder can be set up, a sales folder can be set up. But maybe we have one property noted on there, or we're going to show 2 or 3 with the exact addresses on there. But none of those are going to work. And now the buyer, we've gotten to know each other. The buyer wants to move forward and look at more properties, maybe go and look at builders' homes if we haven't shown them as part of this. We're going to really begin searching. You know how you work with some people months years, it seems, before they actually decide on something. So if you're doing that, of course, you're going to want the buyer's brokers agreement, which is the totally revised. It has all the necessary language for the transparency in it. It's more detailed, a lot more detailed. And it does have in there, you'll see on the second page under number 6, it talks about a non-refundable retainer. We are not going to collect retainers. So I did put a 0 there just to remind you, as to help you walk through the forms. Under compensation, 3% of the purchase price, that will be our professional fee for working with buyers. There is a conditional termination amount there in 9. I put 500. You've been working with these people for 6 months, and now they want to terminate the agreement. So there would be that termination fee. But again, the rule of reason has to apply. If you're not happy with them, they're not happy with you, you're going to waive that. But it is there in the event that you've driven all over with your gasoline, your time, you've taken them out to lunch, whatever, so that there is some there for some compensation. On number 10, you will see that just as with the listing agreement, there is a dispute resolution clause. We are recommending that both in your listings now and in your listings with buyers, with the buyer's brokers agreement, that you initial in the brackets for arbitration rather than any litigation moving forward, so that it would be mandatory arbitration. If there's an issue that arises out of it, we'll agree to arbitrate and solve it that way. A less costly, simpler way of doing it. So both listings moving forward, not amending any existing listings, but any listings moving forward or any buyer's brokers agreement or showing agreements, any dispute resolution clauses, we're going to ask for initials in the brackets for arbitration. And there is some blank areas there that you can write in additional terms if you need to. We'll get more clarification about that question about what about a bonus that a seller is paying or that a builder is paying, which would be over the amount that's stated in our buyer's brokers agreement as the maximum we can collect. I'm sure that there's going to be a vehicle for doing that, and maybe it will be with the modification to our buyer's brokers agreement and or an addendum to it, which I think the buyer obviously would have to agree to it. But I think that is probably the way that that's going to move forward, and we'll get a lot more clarification on that for you. So we have a lot of new rules and new things to go through. We're going to be coming around to each of the offices to go through all of the forms again and answer any and all of your questions. I know we don't have a lot of time for questions today, but I think we're moving along pretty well. I see that we do have a couple of questions coming up here. Oh, okay. Okay. That's just people letting us know that we sound okay. So that's a good thing. So moving forward, I know we went through things quickly and we weren't, and let's see, we weren't going to necessarily do role play, but I think it might be, since we do have so many of you on this morning, that perhaps it would be helpful, and we'll do it again when we come to the in-office meetings too. Let's see, I think Matt Fall says exclusive buyer's broker agreement number 10. Looks like it says mediation first, then arbitration. Yes, first mediation, then arbitration. That's correct. Mediation would always be first because we tried to do a win-win with a mediation. And hopefully that'll resolve issues. If with mediation we can't resolve, then we would go on to formal arbitration, which is binding on all of the parties. So thanks, Matt. I hope that clears that up a little bit. I know you're going to have a chance to look at all of these forms in depth if you haven't already. And that'll be helpful when we come around to the offices so that we can answer all of your questions. But I think so Cindy's getting ready to go and meet with a seller on Thursday. You're going to be meeting with all of your sellers that are currently listed now to talk about the changes coming up, because in 2 weeks, all those offers of compensation are going to be out of the MLS. So let's see, we had Jennifer Worthling in Lakewood Ranch. We register our clients and it covers all the builders. How does the buyer broker agreement come into play? That's a good question, Jennifer. And I think that depending on the compensation that the builders are offering, again, the maximum we can collect is what it says in that buyer's broker's agreement. So I think if we know a builder is going to offer more or a bonus, I'm sure that we're going to be able to talk with the buyer and amend that buyer's broker's agreement to allow us to earn more. But
And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Polly, I believe that you can have a showing agreement for a particular property or builder, and then you can also have a buyer's broker agreement. For example, you have a buyer's broker agreement that says 3% is the fee that I'll be charging, obviously, if we go forward on any property that you purchase. However, a showing agreement would be if you buy 123 Elm Street that's offering the bonus, or whatever the compensation is that you've been educated on, you can make that showing agreement just for that particular. Then you don't have to go back and modify it. You just have one that covers everything, and the showing agreement for any property specifically that would be different terms than that broker's agreement.
yeah, that would be a good way to do it, Cindy. So there'll probably be a couple of different scenarios there. And Jennifer is asking, could we add to the agreement if a bonus is being offered? That is a question, that is one of the question marks that the attorneys, they say is a gray area. If we put 3% plus any bonus being offered, that is considered open-ended. And we cannot have an open-ended thing in any buyer's broker's agreement. So like I said, I think we're going to get more clarification about that, but I think Cindy's suggestion would be a good one. Again, though, it's up to the buyer. Because in reality, in the buyer's paying. It's the buyer is paying, even if some concessions are coming from a seller or a builder. It's still considered the buyer paying. So let's do a little role play, just a little bit, Cindy. I'm the seller. And I can be mean sometimes to give a hard time. But Cindy's going to meet with me and talk a little bit about compensation and how we handle compensation. So,
well, Polly, I'll tell you that I know you've bought and sold many homes in the past. Things have changed recently. And first, I want to go over our compensation disclosure. That's where I would go through that. Let her know that all commissions are negotiable, on top of the fact that what my percentages that our company charges is for the listing side, should you choose to do business with me. And in also letting you know that you can, and it's totally your option, if you want to offer any compensation to the selling broker or concessions to any buyer. I will let you know that being that it's a pretty heavy buyer's market right now, Your home is one of 18 in this neighborhood that's on the market. I can't speak for the other listings, but we want to do everything that we possibly can to throw out the biggest net to attract buyers or agents working with buyers to your property. And if you'd like, I could go through the pros and cons of that or answer any of your questions with regards to compensating the selling broker.
Thank you, Cindy.
Mhm.
So that would be the way that you would initiate that discussion with the seller. And you'll be doing that, of course, talking a little bit about, I feel pretty confident that your existing sellers are going to want to continue to offer, because it's in the contract that they've already signed, to indicate that. And I see we've got a couple more questions. We'll come back to it again. But one thing that's important that we don't want to forget to mention is that you cannot search, obviously, any longer the MLS for the amount of compensations that's being offered to anyone working with the buyer, to you working with the buyer. Any and all properties that are suitable for the buyer that you're working with, whether compensation is offered or not, they have to be made aware of those properties. If they choose to tell you that they cannot afford to pay the commission amount that's in their buyer, in the buyer's broker's agreement, they'll need to get it from a seller that is offering compensation to a buyer's broker. And so they would have to tell you, you show them all the properties that are suitable. Now, this one, I've checked, I've called, and I've checked on all of these. This particular one, the seller is not going to be offering any concessions or compensation to anyone working with the buyer. You would need to let that buyer tell you, then don't show me that. They would direct you.
And I would also recommend, I know this is a lot of work, but if you present a property to a buyer that is not offering compensation, and as a result, the buyer is directed you to not show them that property because of that, to maybe have them initial it or sign that listing. I always think that putting things in writing solidifies it. People have selective memories.
Yeah.
They remember, they don't remember, you never told me, that kind of thing. So if at all possible, I would definitely recommend doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because they're the ones directing you not to show that property, or they may go, could you call the listing agent and let's just double check, and maybe the seller would agree, because we know sellers, they go, I'm not going to take a penny less, and then they do. So I wouldn't see that this would be any different, because their goal is to sell their property. The buyer's goal is to buy property, and it's always going to be that way. And buyers do need help with all of the different things that are being done. Now, that being said, what if you, the listing agent, get a call from a buyer? It's your listing, and that buyer calls you. You know that you have the amount of compensation that is coming from the seller. If you are going to work with that buyer, then you would need to have either the showing form or the exclusive buyer's broker's agreement, probably the showing form with the compensation explanation with it. Then that would allow you to help that buyer and work with that buyer. And there are a couple of good questions coming up here I'm going to get to in a second. What if that buyer calls you, I'd like to see your listing, and you're getting compensation from the seller, obviously, it's your listing agreement. Then that buyer goes, I just want to see the home. I am going to have my attorney write the offer. I'm perfectly capable of ordering and handling all of my own inspections, all of my own negotiation. I don't need any of your services. In that case, could you let the buyer see the property? You're not going to do any of your services. You're not going to help them at all because you don't have to work for free. In that case, I would recommend that you give them the notice of no representation. You're not gonna help them. They're not compensating you. They're going to do all of these things on their own. So that's another little wrinkle. I don't think that'll happen very often. That'd be a very sophisticated buyer or an investor possibly, which could happen, but that would be the way to handle that. But now let's see, we've got a couple more questions. Let's see, Rebecca Samler. If when we meet with current sellers and they say they immediately want to discontinue compensation to a buyer's agent, do we right away do a modification to the current listing and change the amount to zero in MLS? I would say you probably would do that. I don't think that's going to be a common occurrence. I think most sellers are going to want to continue. Indeed, I think probably sellers moving forward will want to also, once they understand the current market that we're in, the price range of the property that they're selling, they may be in a price range that any and all buyers coming will certainly be able to pay their own and compensate their own broker on their own. So all of those different factors comes into it. But Rebecca, if you do have a seller now that said no, they want to go by the new rules, then I would do a modification to the listing agreement and go ahead and change it in MLS. But remember, 2 weeks from now, all that's going to be out of MLS. But if they did want to change their mind, then you need that modification. Absolutely. And I think, wanted to see if I missed any question. David just wanted me to please, David Eckel wanted me to please be sure to mention DeltaNet again, because yes, we will have our DeltaNet as a tool so that we can indicate our sellers that are offering compensation. We're not going to put the amount there. Some sellers may offer 2%, some may offer 3%, we don't know. And that's their option. But we definitely will have that field, which Karina has worked with the DeltaNet people. It's there. And Karina's going to be coming with us for the in-office meetings. And she's going to actually show you where you go in and how you do this on DeltaNet. So that's a really important component for this, because I know moving forward, a lot of agents are going to go, well, I'm going to go to Wagner Realty's website and I can look and see properties that would fit my buyer's needs that are, since the buyers told me they need help with compensation, I'll know to look for those properties because that's what they have instructed me to do. And Becky said buyers are not going to want to put their tax ID. Yes, that's a really good point, Becky. No, buyers are not going to want to put their tax ID down, and I would not ask them to. The title company, their lender's going to want that. The title company is going to want that. So when it gets to actual contract time, when they're going to be getting ready to compensate you, those forms will need to go to the title company. And I indicate getting those buyer's brokers agreements along with the sales contract to the title company, whether they ask for it or not, because now that will be part of the monies that the buyer is going to be responsible for on the closing statement. So that's a real important component of this. So, but no, I wouldn't have them put down their tax ID number, Becky. Good question. Joyce Bodas, got a couple more. Let's see, the El Conquistador office. They're asking about the fee for our listings. We're not going to talk about that today. Moving forward from July 23rd, the new listing agreements will be out, and we will talk about our brokerage professional fee for our listings at that time. Carrie Gorgone, is anything specific needed if the listing agent represents both sides? Carrie, yes, you'll have your listing agreement, And if you're going to work with the buyer as well, then you're going to need the buyer's broker's agreement. Or if it's the just the simple showing agreement, then we're transaction brokers, presumption of transaction brokerage, but you're going to need that compensation disclosure form also. If you use the showing, if you use the buyer's broker's agreement, then you should be okay with your listing agreement and your listing buyer's broker's agreement. So you have both listed. Let's see, did I miss any other questions? Because we've had some good, and we'll have plenty more questions as well, I know, as we come around. And I think as you look through all of the forms too and review them, you're going to come up with things like Becky did. Oh, gee, do they have to put their tax ID now down? Or like Matt Fall did, mediation, then arbitration.
Right.
So as we look at the forms, and I think one of the main things about we're working together on this, we're going to move together through this and think about, I think the people that are going to be the most confused are going to be the buyers. They're like, hey, can you meet me at this house and show me that property? No, I need to have you come in. I need about 20 minutes with you so that I can do your buyer's booklet and I can explain to you the process, and make sure that you're looking at the properties that really and truly are going to suit your needs.
Is the buyer's handbook going to be a downloadable PDF as well?
Yeah, that's a good
If
question.
we physically can't meet with them?
I think that will definitely be available if we can't physically meet with them. And also, remember all of these agreements, just the way the listing agreement is, they can all be e-signed too. So if you get that buyer, we know it happens and they want you to do that video showing.
Mm-hmm.
You could get with them ahead of time and get the necessary forms e-signed ahead of that video showing of the property. We've had that happen quite a bit.
Yeah.
They actually buy, pretty much sight unseen. So that, and the other important thing about this too, moving forward also, you've always had your listing presentations. You're going to have, in addition to the buyer's handbook, you're going to want to have your listing presentation for buyers also. And Cindy has been in the process of going through all of those and identifying pages that need to be taken out of Cloud CMA, the buyer's presentation in Cloud CMA. There's some things that have to come out because it talks about you don't have to pay for this. And that was one of the big problems that got us to all of this. So those are going to come out, and Jeannie and Karina, they're going to work on the different buyer presentations too, so that they're updated, the flip books and all of those wonderful tools that we have to work with. So we'll be doing all of that. So let's see, we've got, I think, another one. Let's see. If we do make the booklet in a PDF form, can it be uploaded into Form Simplicity as well? I don't see why not.
Yeah.
And we'll get with Nancy Allen. Nancy oversees all of that. And I want to thank Nancy too, because she's going to be playing a big role in getting the package, the buyer package for Wagner Realty, plus getting the compensation disclosure form in our Wagner form packet up on Form Simplicity. So we'll be getting all of that done. So that was a really good suggestion to actually have that up there too. So you could, send it, whatever. Yeah, absolutely. Very good. And we, I think, let's see, was there another? No. So I think we've gone through everything pretty well. We're just coming up a little less than an hour. We allowed an hour and a half because we weren't sure exactly how long it would take to go through everything this morning. But now what I would encourage is that each of you look over all of these forms. We'll be coming office to office next week, where we can sit down, we can answer questions, we can talk about things.
Mhm.
I think one of the other things, there'll be a lot of confusion from buyers in the beginning. And the other thing, don't get caught up in, but what if? Oh, golly, what if? Well, what if this happens? A lot of the things and a lot of the what ifs, they happen already anyway, Um, so I know we'll be talking about a lot of what ifs when we come out to the offices to help answer your questions. So I hope that this was helpful. Please look at all of these forms and write down your questions because that's going to really help as we come
Yeah.
around. In the meantime, though, you may have a question, you're getting ready to work with someone. You probably want to start using the buyer agreements now. They're absolutely, it's a way to begin practicing for what's going to be necessary in just a couple of weeks
Yeah.
anyway. So I'd recommend doing that. Will you be successful every single time you sit down with the buyer? No, probably not. And it may be in the beginning that the buyers are going, what in the world is going on? I'm going to call somebody else. Well, and they call somebody else, and then they call somebody, and everybody is going to be in the same boat. We're all in this together. So you see, I think David Eckel had another question. David said, yes, yes, absolutely, David. This is a positive change for our industry. I think that that is important. We always try to do a good job, and we're going to do it with Wagner Realty. We're going to do it the right way. There are no workarounds. We're going to do it the correct way. And this really is going to lend professionalism to our industry because right now you'll get a call from certain agents, or you'll be working with the buyer and you look in MLS and you'll see who the listing agent is, and you'll go, oh, please don't want them to have to deal with that property, because we know that, there are some problems out there. I think this is going to really be a plus for our industry. And it's going to be a very favorable thing moving forward.
And I think it's good also that this change is coming about while we're in a buyer's market. Had this happened 2-3 years ago when we were in a seller's market, the outcome of what sellers may or may not be willing to do, I think would be drastically different than it is today. So moving through this and getting acclimated and knowledgeable about it, I think came at a perfect time during, this more balanced or buyer's market that we're in as well.
Yeah, I think, Cindy, that's a great point, because I think that's going to help the transition. And there'll be this transition period, but and we're all learning, and everybody is working through this at the same time. I think it's important to point out, is this part of the law, part of Chapter 475? No, it is not. It is part of the National Association of Realtors settlement of the large suits. I know you've been reading about this and all of that, but by and large, most real estate professionals are part of the National Association of Realtors, part of an MLS system. And so for the most part, by and large, everyone's going to be working under this format. So that's why I say we're all in this together pretty much. So let's see, I think there was another question right now. Nope. And I know that there'll be lots and lots and lots of questions as we move forward. So in that case, I think we're pretty good. And I hope, nope, here's one. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Tina. Thank you, ladies, for taking the time out of your day for the meeting. Well, I hope that this was helpful. We were happy to do it. And we'll be talking a lot more about it. We'll be doing role play. The new listing agreements will come out. So we'll be definitely talking about those listing agreements. Probably might even do another company-wide that you can jump on to go through the listing agreements. And remember, your managers, thank you to all of the managers. They're there for you every day to help walk you through all of this. And they have been through all of the forms, so they're knowledgeable as well. So you have your managers you can ask. We're always glad to answer any questions.
Absolutely.
And continue to learn. Go on the Berlin Patent website. Their webinars are all recorded. I think the more you listen to it,
Yeah.
the more it kind of clarifies everything and everything kind of falls into place. So I thank you very much for your time. I know you're all busy. So what I would say now, have a great day and go out and practice.
Yeah.